So today I'm bringing you guys another Tempest build. My last one, the Shock Therapist, was really good at countering power classes with its weakness uptime, but it wasn't amazing at cleansing conditions for itself and its allies. So today I'm bringing you guys another build for a different composition situation. But first I want to talk about the Shock Therapist a little bit. I've made a revision to the build and I use the Absorption Sigil now, which steals a boon whenever you interrupt an enemy on like a 3-second cooldown. So with all the shocking aura uptime you have, you interrupt a lot, and yeah, you just get a lot of sustain and remove a lot of boons over time with that, and that's definitely better than Savagery because your damage isn't gonna need that many modifiers. So yeah, that's what I use now on that. But today, we're going to talk about the Heat Therapist. This is another Tempest build that uses the Water trait line, but it's also using the Fire trait line with Smothering auras. And whenever you give someone an aura, you cleanse a condition from them. And you're giving out tons of auras because of Powerful Aura. And you also have decent amount of damage because the Fire trait line gives you tons of fire auras. Whenever you swap into Fire Attunement, you gain a fire aura. And whenever I get a Conjure weapon out, and I'm using Earth Shield, I'll get another fire aura. And this gives out tons of burning over time, which gives you that pressure that you really need as a support to not just be ignored, right? You actually do things when your teammates don't need support. And you can also kind of like get damage out to kind of get presence, not just be a wet noodle. So let's go over the full build. I'm using Soldier Rune with Sage Amulet and Energy Smoldering. So Energy is a no-brainer, but I don't need Cleansing Sigil because I have plenty of cleansing in the build. So I take Smoldering for more burning duration. You can take Burning Precision for more burning duration and more burning uptime, but I'm using Sages, so you don't really crit very often, so you don't really proc this. So I just take Conjurer for more burning procs off of the field, off of fire auras. But Rune of the Soldier is really good because whenever I use a shout, I cleanse a condition. But whenever I use a shout, I also cleanse another condition on top of that because all of my shouts give either an aura, like Feel the Burn and Aftershock and Rebound. They all give an aura, which procs Smothering auras, but also Wash Away the Pain gives a Condi cleanse at the end. So all of my shouts cleanse 2 conditions, which is really big, and there's just so many other ways to gain an aura on top of that, so the Condi cleanse is out the roof. Also, I use Sage Amulet because you're giving out burns, so you want Condi damage. You also have a decent amount of power damage. And yeah, that's pretty much the runes and sigils. The traits, in water, I take Stop, Drop, and Roll because removing Chilled is really good. Chill is probably the hardest counter to Ellie's. You can take Soothing Ice because that'll be shared to your allies and give out more regen and Frost Aura. But it's on a 60-second cooldown, so it's really not that good. And you're not really doing too much Vuln, like the air build. So I would take Stop, Drop, and Roll. Or Soothing Ice if you want a little bit more passive sustain. Next, I have Flow Like Water. That gives you a little bit of a damage increase when you're above the health threshold, but mostly it's for the healing that it gives you when you evade an attack every 10 seconds. This isn't really that important, but I feel that Cleansing Wave is not more important than giving yourself a little bit more sustain because Staff Ellie is not really that tanky, so you really need to give yourself some self-ish sustain. And obviously you're not using cantrips. And then Powerful Aura is a no-brainer. You could take Cleansing Water, and this would give you 3 Condi cleanses whenever you use a shout because you're not really sharing the auras that you give out when you shout. you are just giving those auras out because those are shouts. They already affect allies, right? But there are many other ways that you get those auras that makes them share out. So it's pretty important that you take powerful aura and not cleansing water, because I think you have enough Condi cleanse anyways. But yeah, that's the water trait line. In fire, I take Conjurer, which gives you a fire aura on Earth Shield, which is pretty nice because when you use your Earth Shield, you're kind of like going in melee usually, and you often get your fire procs off because of that. And it also reduces the recharge of Earth Shield, which makes it a minute cooldown, so it's pretty nice. Sunspot, obviously this is really nice because it gives you a fire aura whenever you swap into Overload or into Fire Attunement, so that's just more sustain and Condi cleanse. Obviously Smothering auras gives you Condi cleanse whenever you get an aura, but it also gives you a 2 Condi cleanse on your transmute, which the only transmute I have is on the Earth 3, and you could argue that, oh, Dagger Focus is better because it gives you more transmutes. But let's be honest, you don't really need the transmute value because you have enough Condi cleanse already. But you do really get some good value from this transmute from Magnetic Aura because you have so many ways to get Magnetic Aura. So for example, I can use number 3 and that'll give me it, and then I can transmute that. Then I can use Overload Earth, which would give me a Magnetic Aura, and then I could use the transmute there. Or I can use Aftershock, that's another Magnetic Aura, I can transmute that. Or if I go into Earth Shield, my 3 skill is a dash ability that dazes, but it also gives Magnetic Aura. So there's 4, I think that's 4 ways to get Magnetic Aura, which means you can basically transmute Earth quite often. And yeah, you're also sharing out those magnetic auras, so you have plenty of projectile reflect. And you'll see later in my my footage, Lich form is basically irrelevant versus this build. So Blinding Ashes is pretty good too because you have so much burn going out from your fire auras, which makes it kind of obnoxious, right, to get blinded every 8 seconds. It's really good sustain for your team to give out blind in team fights because randomly removing like an attack is just really good. And there's like some clutch situations, like if you know a thief is gonna like steal backstab to you, what you can do is you can put on Feel the Burn or any kind of fire aura, and if they steal to you and they're using deadly arts, the mug would proc their the fire aura, and that would burn them, which would blind them, and then their steal or their backstab would then miss. So yeah, this is a really good trait, and there's not really much else you could use anyways. So yeah, I would just take Blinding Ashes. And then for Tempest, you definitely want more auras, so you take Unstable Conduit. And Invigorating Torrents is a must-have because giving vigor to your allies is really good, but the regen is insanely good. There's really no other way to give out that much regen. You can basically like give out perma regen to your allies because you're giving out so many auras, and regen over time heals for quite a bit on top of your Soothing Mist, right? So you're giving out tons of healing and tons of sustain. So you definitely need this, and that's why you can't really take Harmonious Conduit, which is kind of sad because having stability when you overload is really valuable, and the swiftness uptime is very valuable. And this is sort of a thing that I mentioned in the last video about the Shock Therapist, is that it made up for lacking swiftness with the air trait line. However, with this build, there's really no way to get swiftness other than the staff. So the staff is kind of like my way of curing that slowness that you have on Tempest builds now, because they removed a lot of the swiftness that you got from it, from overloading. It used to be a passive trait, but now you have to pick it, but you really can't pick it. So you get the swiftness from windborne speed, but obviously the uptime of that isn't 100%. You have a 10-second duration with a 25-second cooldown, so you make up for that lack of swiftness with the ability to just use ranged pressure on your allies. So staff doesn't need to be near your allies to actually do things. So being less mobile isn't that big of a deal. But with like a dagger focus build, it really sucks to not have swiftness because you've got to always constantly be moving. With staff, you have the luxury to not really move that much. So pretty good, in my opinion, of a workaround for that. Also with Earth Shield, you have a lot of mobility because this is a dash attack and it's on a 9-second cooldown. And you also have Fire 4, which is another kind of like movement skill. So you have a little bit of mobility to make up for the times where you don't have swiftness. And then obviously whenever you give out an aura, you heal for 600, and that's pretty much necessary to the build. You're giving out so many auras, you're giving out so much sustain. It's a support build. So yeah, that's pretty much the traits and the sigils and the runes. But how does the build play? Generally, you want to start out in the air attunement, and what you'll do is you'll give swiftness at the start or whatever, and then you'll do like a static field for your team or whatever, and then you'll overload air, try to give out that, and then gust, immediately swap to fire and pop out like the 2 and the 4 and maybe do like the fire 4 for some damage. If your team needs sustain at this point, you would swap to water, but if they don't, you would go into overload fire for more damage and more fire auras for your team, and then depending on where you go from there, you can like do more pressure with meteor shower or go into earth and give out magnetic auras and transmute that. You can do a lot of damage with eruption because this is 6 bleeds. So if you just spam that in a team fight, it actually adds up to quite a bit of damage, and it's quite a low cooldown too. So just like, obviously it's a really hard skill to land, but if you just throw it on node and people are fighting on node, it's going to do damage to people. So yeah, that's really good. Obviously unsteady ground gives you a lot of CC and zoning potential, and your 5 skill is a nice immobilize. So you have a plenty CC for your team, and yeah, you can do a lot of plays with like static field and then gust them, and then you can go into earth and unsteady ground them and then immobilize them, and you can help your team land a lot of damage with that CC. And then while they're CC'd, after you've already done all your CC, you can put a lava font on them and then do flame burst into field to burn, and then you can do quite a bit of damage yourself. In the water weapon set, you need to be constantly spamming your 2, which is a blast finisher, into your combo fields. So like you do 2 and then 4, and this will give you a aura, a frost aura, which will share to your allies. Obviously, you want to land the aura on your allies if possible, but say there's a situation where your ally is like here and you started blasting like over here. Well, the radius of the blast isn't that far to land on them. So what you can do is you put the blast there, and then you put yourself in the middle, and that would share it to this person over here. So you can kind of like extend the range of your auras using the aura share trait, because they're not in range of the original blast location, but you are, and then they're in range of you. So that's something important to realize. Also, you have tons of Condy Cleanse on Healing Rain as well. And yeah, you just want a blast finisher as often as possible in this. So you use 2 into the 4 usually, and then 2 into the 3, 2 into the 5. And then once you've used all that, you can decide whether you want to overload water for another aura and tons of healing. And yeah, there's a lot of combos you can do, and just getting used to the situations that you want to be in is pretty important. Also, I have Earth Shield, so Earth Shield is a pretty important skill here because it gives you a lot of CC as well. So Magnetic Surge gives you a 2-second daze if you land it, and it also does pretty decent damage. And of course the Magnetic Aura, which you'll share. And then Magnetic Shield gives you a really nice pull, which is really far range, as you can see. And that's really good for setting up combos for your team, where you can like Magnetic Shield, and then you could swap out into air and then static field everyone into that pull. Other skills on your Earth Shield include the Stone Sheath, which is just a block that gives you barrier, and it'll also bleed. So if you counterattack them, it'll give you a nice damage bonus with the Sage Amulet. And the one skill is just a nice attack that gives out bleeds, and it scales with barrier. So if you have barrier on you, which you can get from using these attacks, it gives you a nice damage bonus on the third strike. And the final skill of Earth Shield is Fortify, which is a 3-second invulnerability where you basically just can't move, but you also can't capture points. But it's really good because being invulnerable is really good for staff Ellies, because you don't have Focus 5 from a Dagger Focus Ellie, which helps them to survive in a lot of situations. So obviously you can't just swap into Earth Attunement and use it very conveniently. You have to kind of premeditate it with the Earth Shield cast. So it's not as strong as Obsidian Flesh, but it's still really good for doing stuff like sitting in the Earth Shield and then like swapping into Water Attunement to get out the regen, or going into Fire to kind of like wait until your overload's about to come up and then you can start overloading. And there's just a lot of things you can do and combos, and it makes this build really interesting because there's a high like skill cap to it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
to move. Find your way back home along the street line. Fields on the other side. The tracks are alone, but they pass you by. Time stands still.
So yeah, if you guys like this build, leave a like and also comment which build you like more, the shock therapist or the heat therapist, or whether you think you're pretty stable and don't need therapy at all. And yeah, enjoy.